As always, a huge thank you to Starboard, who are once again this season's main sponsors. Starboard has a history of innovation across water sports, starting in 1994 by revolutionising the design of windsurf boards, and they've brought that bang up to date recently, bringing foil windsurfing onto the Olympic stage with their IQ foil package. Starboard got behind stand-up paddleboarding in a huge way in the early days and continue to lead the industry to reduce their environmental impact. Their focus on innovation brought them 7 world champions at the ICF Worlds last year, and all of them were using their Lima paddle range. They continue to improve and innovate their boards and their paddles for all abilities across all flavours of the sport, including adventure. And you can find out more about Starboard through their website, which is linked to in the show notes. Welcome to the SUPfm podcast with me, Simon Hutchinson. Every week, I chat with interesting people from the SUP world, or to people who can help us, the paddlers of the SUP tribe, to improve and to maximise our own experiences and our love of both the sport and the water. Every episode is designed to inspire or to help you get a deeper immersion into the sport through my conversations with leading athletes, scientists, explorers, TED speakers, and New York Times best-selling authors. And not forgetting some of the many insanely inspiring distance paddlers we've routinely had on the show. This is the second part of my chat with Casper Steinfath, and if you haven't already heard the first one, then it's really worth going back and listening to that one first. In this episode, we chat about some of his non-racing achievements, which include his Viking crossings, which were no easy thing to achieve and where he had to wrestle with failure, and his recent Great Danish Paddle, where he circumnavigated Denmark in all conditions. We also talk about the annual Midsummer Vikings, recently held in Copenhagen, where teams from all across the world compete over a 24-hour event. So here's the second part of my chat with Casper Steinfath. So, Casper, obviously you're most known for your racing career across the world, but you have been on a number of adventures which show the huge diversity of conditions and different opportunities for adventure in and around Denmark. Could you just give us an overview of the Viking Crossings project?
So the whole Viking Crossing saga kind of started back in late 2016. It's back to like the first moment I set feet on a stand-up paddleboard. It was, I was aware at that moment that this is more than just a surfboard. This is a vehicle that you can actually travel distance on. And I started paddling up and down the coast, and, that led me into racing and the rest of the story we've been through. But something that I was deeply fascinated by as a kid was the sagas of the Vikings, and the Vikings that set sail and paddled out from Scandinavia, and went to all kinds of places. They went over and said hi to you guys. Sorry about
for
that.
A while. That's all right. I owe my rugby club crest to the Vikings, and probably a fair slice of my ancestry as well. So, no offense taken.
Okay. But I mean, the Vikings had quite an impact on Northern European history, but actually like much wider as well. And like, I was always fascinated by the stories of especially their warriors, but also they had maritime knowledge, or like they at least jumped into some crazy situations, like making it across the North Atlantic, going down to around Europe, down to the Mediterranean, and like through all these rivers into Eastern Europe. So like their maritime achievements kind of had always like been in the back of my head. And I think when stand-up paddling came about, I was intrigued by it. But it was first like in 2016 that I started really paying attention to, okay, there's more than just racing. And, I started just looking at Google Maps and seeing what would be cool to do. And that was when the first Viking crossing to Norway came about, across the ocean of Skagerrak.
And the film's there on Red Bull TV. It's free. You can check that out, and it's a really powerful film. And I won't spoil the ending, but let's just discuss your first attempt. Well, we know you did it in the end, but let's just talk about your first attempt there, because I think it's only a short part right at the very front of the film, but I get the sense that it was something that you just learned a huge amount from, and which really sort of pushed you forward. Because managing failure, sometimes failure can be seen as a negative thing, but you definitely saw that as a real positive. Just talk about that first attempt to get across the straight.
Well, yeah, because the key word was failure. I was so fascinated by adventure, and I kind of came into the first crossing. And the ocean of Skagerrak is between Denmark and Norway. It's roughly 130 kilometers in a straight line. It's a notorious stretch of water because the currents are gnarly, they're ever changing, and the weather is, let's just call it unpredictable. And I paddled that first attempt, and I had been going for 16 hours, and I could literally see Norway out in the distance, like 12 kilometers away. I could see the lighthouse from Kristiansand looking at me, and I almost felt like I was tired and broken, and the ocean was chaotic, and I could hardly stand on my board. And I felt like I was Frodo and looking at the Tower of Sauron, just staring me down. But ultimately, what happened was I failed. I reached a point where I felt like I was just an arm's length away, but the conditions had just deteriorated. A storm had brewed, and suddenly I could no longer stand in these choppy seas. I think we all know the feeling at some point, where you just can't. And I got hauled into the safety boat next to me, and it was too dangerous for myself and my team to follow through. So failure is exactly what happened. I did not succeed on that first attempt, and I basically, when I got pulled onto the boat, I was sitting there defeated, because I had jumped into the project as I felt like the king of the ocean. I was a world champion. I had my sponsors saying, "Yeah, you got this." My family was saying, "You got this." And I felt like I had really disappointed a lot of people there. And I had been cocky as well. I'd told the team, like, yeah, make sure to put the champagne on ice. I'll be there later this evening. We'll celebrate. And no, that was not what happened. So I was sitting there on the boat. And, when you say, Simon, that I learned from failure, that was later. Like, in that moment when it happened, it just sucked.
But someone on the boat was ahead of you, weren't they?
Yeah. Yes. So when I was sitting on the boat with frozen fingers, because this was in the middle of winter as well, the cinematographer, the director of what would then become the documentary film, his name is Peter Alsted, and I've known the guy for a long time. He's a funny guy, but he just comes up to me when I'm sitting there crying, and he just says, "Casper, don't cry, man. This is the best thing ever. Now you get to try again." And I just remember, part of me felt like I was ready to punch him, but he ended up just hugging me, and but it made sense what he said, because I think he was actually, as a filmmaker, struggling to actually find out what type of story is he going to tell, if because I had been challenged, but it was only right at the end that it was too much. So anyway, a couple of months passed after that. I got home and still kind of down, but pretty quickly, actually, some thoughts started racing through my mind, thinking, well, actually, maybe the weather conditions were actually not perfect on this day. I was probably not in peak physical shape either, and navigation, yeah, I probably could have done that better as well. So quickly, I started realizing I had made some errors in my approach, and at that point, I felt that I wanted to learn from my mistake. And I think I had the choice of either taking the whole experience, packing it down into a box, putting a lock on it, and never looking at it again. That was an option, but that would kind of just be like hiding something under the rug. So I don't know. I definitely chose to face the problems, and 1 year later, the following winter, I was at it again, a second time to try to learn from my mistakes, and that time it was a different story. I don't even know really what to say. It was a process I was in that really taught me a lot about, the beautiful thing about failure when it's done. Not, I don't want to say failed correctly, but like when you try to extract as much as you can, because a failure can be the best learning we all can have. And I think it's regardless if you're a world-class athlete, or you're a business manager, or you're a student at school. You have situations where you're asked to perform, and things just don't go your way. Like you flunk an exam, or a presentation goes bad. It sucks, and it really sucked in the moment for me when I was on that boat. But something good did come out of it, and
And it depends on the sort of label you put on the failure there. So you talked about how you are the king of the ocean. So that was obviously tied up with your own self-image. So therefore, when things don't go well enough, then, that squashes your self-image. And that's what a lot of people do with failure. They think, well, I'm obviously not good at maths or, whatever it is. So I'll just put it away in that box and not deal with it. And if I don't touch it, I don't need to think about the fact that I'm not a master of the ocean. But where you take it into a process, that's when you can start managing it. And it sounds like that's what you do. And you do a talk, don't you? You've been to schools and talked to kids about this whole process, because it's really important that kids, understand that failure is just a moment of time. And basically you only really fail if you give up on what it is that you're working towards.
Yeah. I mean, it's I didn't see it myself in the moment. Like actually the fact that Peter, the filmmaker, was there, helped actually me realize that what is failure. And, I had the pleasure of going out to schools to talk to kids about the concept, because, and I see it myself when I look back through my social media sometimes, and I look at other people's social media. We are constantly bombarded with images of happiness and success, and people standing on a podium lifting a trophy. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but one must understand that is just part of a bigger picture. Like there's a deeper story. Like even Michael Booth, when I look at Michael Booth, like he's one of the most fantastic athletes I see, and successful in every single way, and it's fantastic to see, and it's inspiring. But like I think all of us athletes, we have, whether it's performance inside the realm of competition or somewhere else, like there's a backside to the medal. And that's what I think the Skagerrak film shows, for me at least, was that for that project to succeed, I had to really dive down and scrape the bottom. And it's fairly natural to do so. I think it's kind of like there's all these sayings and all these cliches, but like, it is the journey that comes to my mind. The journey of going through, it taught, the fact that I failed taught me so many valuable lessons. And I feel like an old fart sitting here, like, oh, this is how it is. But I'm happy that I failed.
Talking about Michael Booth. So in my interview with him, there was one line that he said, which really stood out for me, which is, he likes being a beginner at things. He likes working out the algorithm. I mean, when I was speaking to him, it was before his new arrival, but he was building a house. I mean, talk about, selecting challenges, but he just looks for those new opportunities, because it's learning and it's figuring it out and it's getting through to the end of it. It's a problem solving exercise. So in terms of the Viking crossing, it didn't just stop at that point with Skagerrak, because last year in 2021, you got on your foil and your paddle and you did another crossing from from Denmark to Sweden. Prevailing wind, I presume, was sort of more or less in your favour there. It was, was it 123 miles, something like that, the Skagerrak. Oh, no, hang on. It was
Kattegat.
Kattegat, there we go. So Denmark to Sweden on a foil, 123 kilometres, spectacular, it looked beautiful. You coming through all the wind farms and so on, you know, unbelievable. 7 kilometres from the finish line. What happened there?
7 kilometers before the finish line was when the real struggle started. Until then, it had been more or less like a walk through a candy shop. Just most magical feeling of just flying across this ocean on a foil, like feeling that I was cheating some laws of physics. But you know, those last 7 kilometers were just before touching down in Sweden, and some factors that were outside of my control entered the arena. The wind died. The wind just very quickly shut down, and to be able to power a hydrofoil in the format that I was using it, and you know, I was using it by having it under my stand-up paddle board, and you know, paddling onto a wave and then riding the swell in the ocean. With no wind, there's no swell, and suddenly I was left, 7K from the beach, and with no other means of propulsion than my arms. I was just sitting there, kind of thinking, "Damn! Like, why is it always like right before the finish that something happens?" I was like, I was just remember sitting there, and I had a following boat next to me, so I could have just gotten on the boat. But there was an element inside me that kind of like a little devil almost that felt, yes, now you really get to work for your food, your sleep, your everything. So I, without thinking much more about it, I just laid down on my stomach and started, you know, paddling with my arms, arm after arm, the last 7 kilometers. And I think I was on my stomach for like 3 hours, just, you know, with a little bit of spray in my face. And it was, you know, adventure. Adventure is also challenge. And that, like, I loved, like, of course, I dreamed of like riding my foil inside the bay in Sweden where I was going to land, like just slowly landing like a plane touching down, lifting my arms, shooting the champagne, boom. But that's how we visualize and how we dream of it. And the same like my Norway crossing, I didn't visualize it was going to end in a failure at first. You know, it's those challenges that just pop up along the way. They make it interesting. And anyway, just to tie a knot on the Sweden expedition, it was rough, those last kilometers, but it, like when I washed ashore, it felt good. It felt like, you know, I had been out on a adventure and seen stuff that really pushed me to a limit. And that's kind of all I can say. But like, kind of like you said, Michael Booth mentioning that, you know, it's picking up new challenges and new ways to learn. I very much recognize that. I have that same feeling of like when I decided to foil to Sweden, it was because it was something new. It was something I had to learn a new skill set to achieve. And it felt really good. It felt really good when it succeeded.
I bet. And doing that, I know Magnus, your coach, sort of went out to provide a bit of encouragement as well.
Oh,
so
yeah.
A bit of social support there. I don't know how you managed to do that 7 kilometres, because you must have burnt more calories doing that bit than the front end of it. I presume Red Bull was involved somewhere in there.
There is a fairly large amount of Red Bulls involved.
Yeah, I would imagine
these projects. But what goes to the story of Kattegat when I was about to reach Sweden on the foil was that when I was on my stomach, like I was in a, you know, and it's funny how memory works, right? Because like I'm happy that you mentioned Magnus, because I kind of forgot it, because like all those tough moments, they don't always, like, it's not what you remember. Like our mind has a selective memory in terms of, you know, a survival mechanism. Like you sometimes remember the hard stuff, sometimes you don't. But I remember being on my stomach, my arms are falling off, and like totally out of energy. then I see this, like mentally I'm about to just crack, but I remember seeing this small dot out in the horizon coming towards me from Sweden, and that was my coach, Magnus. And I think he had been tracking me, and he knows me better than anyone almost. And once he heard I was on my stomach, he knew that he had to do what he could do to help. And so he just came out and gave me some moral support. And I just remember I hadn't seen him at that point because of COVID. I hadn't seen him for 2 years, and I remember we just hugged out in the middle of Kattegat, and it was emotional. Like tears just formed in my eyes, and when you can be so happy seeing someone that you haven't seen for a long time, sharing a strong passion, that was a magic moment. It definitely was.
And he's been with you, like you spoke about Robbie Nash earlier on. Your relationship with Magnus has been one that you've had for quite some time, all the way through your racing career. And I get the impression that he provided a bit of shape early, but you've kind of developed that relationship where everything's a bit more fluid in terms of your training approach. Would that be fair? Or is he a hard taskmaster? And if you're not down doing pull-ups at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning, then you're in trouble?
He's well, it's yes and no. Like I started working with Magnus in 2012, and he was the one that probably brought, like Magnus is Swedish, and he comes from a background in cross country skiing and coaching and in various other sports, but he's a paddler himself. But I think he kind of came in and brought me knowledge of methodical training, and he introduced me to methodical training. Of he made these fantastic training plans, like these great Excel spreadsheets with all these colors and hours and like this and that, and morning session, evening session, strength, full package. And he came in, but what I always, and I think that's why we still work very well together today, is because Magnus, like I was curious to learn from him, but he was just as much curious to learn from me, because this was new territory for him. Stand-up paddling, I mean, he was intrigued by the body mechanics of how, what muscle groups and techniques and equipment actually go into building a fast paddler. So in a sense, I was the guinea pig, and he was the scientist trying to make sense of everything. I think what Magnus realized was I did not, like, I could function with, like, I am very methodical, but I'm also methodical inside a certain realm. And, like I always play when I go on the ocean. And I think just playing on a race board in the waves, like I really loved that. And like for all my teenage years, that was what I was doing every day when I could. So I think Magnus realized that, and he realized that just as important as it is to have a good, lactate threshold and, to be mobile and have muscle mass, he also realized the value of, the balance skill set and the ability to read water. So he gave me space to incorporate that into my training. So that's what in some, like some people will view it as a very loose form of training. But I think if I had gone all hardcore and just stuck to flat water, I probably would be a much stronger paddler, but I don't think I would have been a better paddler. Put it like that.
You would have been more one-dimensional, wouldn't you, in that environment? And I think that's where stand-up paddling is very different to other endurance sports, because if there's a downwind drawn, a prospect, or if you got some waves out there, then you're going to want to go out and just develop your skill set, because living in Northern Europe, those things don't come along all the time. Really, you've got to take your opportunities where you can. Whereas if you're on a bike, or if you're a runner, or Nordic skiing, that there's less variability, I guess, in terms of the training experience there. I mean, a headwind is a pain in the backside for a cyclist, but it doesn't have the same effect as it does on a stand-up paddleboarder.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's interesting, because we're still seeing it develop, and it fit my mindset very well to make the most of the given conditions, but also the fact that like if you had Magnus on here, he could talk from now until tomorrow about, the positive aspects of stand-up paddling. And like I just think that like you said, it's not one dimensional. Like it is multidimensional in the sense that like you can have conditions where it is completely flat. You can have conditions where you need to change your equipment, you need to change your style. There's so many nuances to stand-up paddle racing where you can totally blow it by approaching it as Rocky Balboa, or like there's a time and place for everything. And I think it's just like basically what Magnus finds interesting is like we are over 10 years into stand-up paddling now, and we still have not defined the optimum physical build for racing. Like look at it, like a guy like if you put Connor Baxter and Michael Booth next to each other. Like Michael is so strong and so compact. Connor is tall and kind of
rangy.
Yeah, and it's just interesting that there's a functionality.
This is the SUPfm podcast with my guest Casper Steinfath, and we'll be right back. As always, a huge thank you to Starboard, who are once again this season's main sponsors. Starboard has a history of innovation across water sports, starting in 1994 by revolutionising the design of windsurf boards, and they've brought that bang up to date recently, bringing foil windsurfing onto the Olympic stage with their IQ foil package. Starboard got behind stand-up paddleboarding in a huge way in the early days and continue to lead the industry to reduce their environmental impact. Their focus on innovation brought them 7 world champions at the ICF Worlds last year, and all of them were using their Lima paddle range. They continue to improve and innovate their boards and their paddles for all abilities across all flavours of the sport, including adventure. And you can find out more about Starboard through their website, which is linked to in the show notes. Now for the rest of my conversation with Casper Steinfath. And there's so little science out there. There was an Australian researcher who, I think back in 2015, did a whole load of different studies around stand-up paddleboarding and all the forms. And he's kind of stepped away from that as a topic. But there's definitely lots of studies to be carried out in the area of stand-up paddleboard science. I could pursue that one, like you, down various alleyways. Just to complete on the Viking crossing, though, it's a 3-stage plan, isn't it, Casper? We've got the 2 crossings. There was an aspiration, or there is an aspiration to do the North Sea, which is, a bit further. How's that going? Are you going to darken our shores again?
I don't know if I'll call it darken your shores, but I'll...
I was taking on the Viking motif there, but no, I mean, we'd be very happy to have you. But what are the plans in terms of the North Sea crossing?
Yeah, so like it's no secret anymore. It's a 3-part, or I don't know if it stops at 3, but like definitely the next step in the plan is the oceans of Skagerrak, Kattegat are complete, and then the next basin of water that the Vikings traversed is the North Sea. And right now I'm just kind of like openly thinking of I'm analyzing right now. How the hell do I take this on? Because it's a long distance. It's like 700-800 kilometers of open water, and it's not just open water. It's like, how do I say? It's like stable. It's like consistently inconsistent, like in terms of wind and waves, and like I don't know. The short answer, Simon, is I don't know when. I don't know how, but I have a dream of trying to crack that code of crossing this legendary ocean. I don't know if it's going to be on a conventional stand-up paddleboard. Will it be a modified one, kind of like what Chris Burdish has been using? Assisted, unassisted. I'm not sure yet, but it's intriguing to just let the thoughts roll.
And you'd be probably better off going UK to Denmark, I guess, as well. Would that spoil the fun for you doing it now?
Nah, I mean, I always love coming home, but I mean, either way, I think would work for me. It's the body of water, like trying to understand how to cope with those conditions the best. Right now, I'm speaking with some top meteorologists from Vestas, the Danish windmill company, and I have access to their data that we're trying to basically crunch the numbers right now and statistically look at what route and what direction is most advantageous. Where it's a little bit more like back to the whole concept of chaos. It's like the wind will shift many times while I'm out there. The currents will change, tides will shift. So it's kind of like Mount Everest for me is probably the way I would look at it. It's that mountain, maybe the final mountain I hope to climb. But if it's this year or next year or in 3 years, I don't know.
But it's being worked on in the background there. It's part of the planning to complete it.
Yeah, it is. And I think maybe like in one sense, I feel I've already taken the first step towards it where this year when I did the Great Danish paddle around Denmark, that was also kind of a test of myself to see how does my body work when it's not just one day I'm paddling, but when it's, multiple days consecutively in harsh conditions, how do I cope mentally and physically? That was an interesting part of the project, but I don't know. I'm kind of like shitting my pants right here, just talking about this whole North Sea business.
Well, it's bits and pieces. And coming back to our initial conversation about fear of the unknown, it's about, spending time on the water, and the Chris Burtish conversation I had with him, he again sort of, connected with so many of the things we've already discussed, but he spent so much time on the water in advance of his cross-Atlantic crossing. He had managed so many different situations that had sort of pushed his level of comfort threshold right the way up. So, if it's not right now, then it's not right now, but it's just building up to that. But
Exactly.
I'm glad that's still on the agenda. So we'll definitely put your trip from England to Newfoundland on the back burner for the moment after your North Sea trip. Okay, let's move on to the Great Danish Paddle. And one of the surprising things that we found out when we were doing this podcast during the COVID lockdowns is that I was asking people, what's your dream location when lockdowns finish? But what people were actually doing is they were concentrating on local paddling, and really, rather than going sort of broad with lots of different locations and, all of the volcanoes and palm trees and so on, it was all about what's happening in your local area and really understanding it. And people were getting a lot of satisfaction and mental health benefits from really going deep locally. So I know that was the original spark, or one of the original sparks for your Great Danish Paddle, to check out some of your local gems. I know that, the Danish Caribbean being one of yours. Just tell us about your thinking processes about the Great Danish Paddle as a concept.
Well, as the concept kind of, it was during COVID definitely that I also started, realizing, well, what do I have? Where can I go? And that the whole Denmark circumnavigation had never been done on a stand-up paddleboard. So obviously, I was personally motivated with the challenge aspect of it. Can it be done? But I think the thoughts that were going through my mind was very much, there's these places around Denmark that I have never visited, I have never seen. There's places that I'm curious about because I've heard about them, but I think for me, it was trying to be able to connect with parts of my backyard. And when I say connect, it's not just look on a map and say, I know where this is. And I've read on Wikipedia what this island is known for. I was curious to go immerse my senses of, feeling, smelling, tasting, and connecting memories in that way. So as going into the project, I had all these dreams and, aspirations as to what the project would be. But I also knew from experience with the Viking crossings that, generally dreams and expectations, they don't always really pan out as you expected. That was also a beauty of this project. Things did not go as expected.
So the Great Danish Paddle, it was a simple project to start with. It was you, paddleboard, a tent, a few supplies. Just talk about some of your experiences there, because it's kind of a bit of a definition of being comfortable with discomfort. I know in one of your posts you were talking about being windburned, sunburned, and having your fingers frozen at the same time. And at the very least, I guess it reminds you of the value of a dry place to sleep and a warm shower. Just talk about some of those experiences as you went around.
Well, as I got going, all kinds of situations arose, like, first of all, the Great Danish Paddle. I got to say thanks to you guys over in Great Britain for letting me kind of borrow the name.
That was Jordan Wiley there. I'm sure he will be very pleased to hear that you've been following him. But yeah,
him and Brendan, they were both huge inspirations. But basically, as I got going, unforeseen things kind of came up, and the crazy thing was that, like, within the first week of paddling, I started out in sunny weather on the 2nd of April. And, April at these latitudes can mean halfway to summer or halfway to winter.
Yeah.
And I literally had sunshine, gale force winds, snowstorms, and rainstorms all within the first 5 days of the project. So, I was sunburnt and had numb fingers at the same time, which was bizarre. But it was, I think it was a rough start to the whole project. But as I got going, I had divided all of Denmark, into sections, and the whole distance being approximately 1,400 kilometers. I really tried to just divide it into sections and make mile posts of to keep myself enthusiastic and motivated. But it just became so real, from the snowstorm on day 5 to crossing the top of Denmark where the two oceans meet, paddling through Copenhagen with an entourage of 40, 50 paddlers, and going down to southern Denmark to the cliffs of Moon, and the Caribbean crevasse with islands. Like, I was island hopping, almost forgetting that I was on a mission. And just there were so many things in between that just turned it into, as Hans Christian Andersen, the famous Danish writer, would call it, just a proper adventure, fairy tale.
And Brendan Prince and Jordan on their journeys talked a lot about the people that they came across on the way, and the support that they get and the interest. Some of the areas that you went to were quite desolate, but as you said, you must have had a bit of that going around.
Well, definitely meeting the Danes was part of my motivation as well, to meet the people and also give myself the time to meet the people. Where, generally when I go somewhere for a project or an event, it's very, you have very limited amount of time to interact with people. And I think I was hoping to have time to properly listen to stories and, embrace the spontaneous. And I was shocked because I set out with a tent and camping gear, expecting to, pretty much just camp. But it was funny, randomly, I met someone on the beach or in the harbor saying we have an extra couch, or we have an apartment you can borrow. And that's kind of what I'm missing right now. I'm sitting here at home, just, in my own place, but there's something special about those people that, I had no formal connection to, but they got inspired by the adventure, and, suddenly a conversation on the beach leads to a warm meal, sometimes a hot shower, and a place to sleep. It was, I think, in short, it was special to be reminded of people's, people are willing to help. People are willing to go out of their way when there is not a good reason, but when, how is it I'm saying, we all, you and I, we all live busy lives, but when someone comes knocking on our door and has a wild story and
Yeah, and
Like,
indeed, it's a community, and again, our sort of primitive drive for security,
yeah,
for society and connection, and all of that sort of stuff. And actually, though people think that it's the giver giving, sometimes they get something from helping someone else who's in need, and I think that's really important thing, for us to consider in the current times that we live in, where everything's so sort of polarized.
exactly.
We're all human beings, we're all on the planet at the same time. Hopefully that I haven't got too hippified in there, but you kind of get the sense of where I'm going to,
No,
and
I got
yeah,
that sense of connection. Like
exactly.
that's a human need as well. And I think especially after COVID, we all kind of got into our own little bubbles, and I think now we're seeing like everyone just kind of exploding to go connect with people, and that was probably my explosion right there, like getting to see and connect and meet.
Amazing. So I got other questions on here. One about the world's largest Toblerone bar, which you picked up at the border post. I had a lot of questions about that, but we'll just skip over those ones for the moment. And then you stuck your board on a trolley and carried it a fair old distance. But in terms of that last day coming in to your starting point, just tell us about that experience, because it was it sun shining on the righteous? Did you downwind most of that day? Or was that
On the final day?
yeah, or the day? It was a couple of days before. You looked like a hollowed out man there. You had a huge beard. You were clearly expended quite a few calories, but you had the odd downwinder on the way back, didn't you? Just tell us
Yeah.
about that and sort of coming into the finishing stage.
So like coming into the finishing stage was, the West Coast, the
Mm,
West Coast of Jutland. And how would I best describe it? It was like the summit stretch of a mountaineer going for the top of the mountain. And I knew that potentially this stretch of coast could have been the most, uh, not dangerous, but the most, problematic at
mm,
least, because you're exposed to all the west wind and waves. I knew that there was a good chance I was going to have a lot of problems here. So actually, like, even though there's those pictures of me looking completely hollow and just, like a ghost, at that point, I had made a point of saving energy.
mm,
And like I had always told myself that until I reach the West Coast, I need to operate at 80%. Like, don't give everything you got, save something. So you always have 20 or 15% left in the tank, because you don't know when you're going to need it. It could be an unforeseen circumstance. It could also just be a really shitty weather forecast.
mm,
But when I made it to the West Coast, the bizarre thing was that I had the most perfect weather forecast in front of me. Just like 3 days of downwind, which is like bizarre because that statistically is so rare to get right on that point. And I remember just almost feeling the pressure there that, okay, well, to cover like, it was like still 250 kilometers or something, 300 kilometers in a few days is a lot. So I got to work, and just I don't even know how to really describe it. It was magical. Like there was times where on the West Coast I just felt like, damn, like the conditions are so good, and I feel so alive. And I got this feeling of like I was actually not happy. Like I was actually bummed, because that means it's going to be over soon. Like
mm,
every stroke I was taking was bringing me closer to my finish line. And when it's like watching a TV show that you just are so immersed in, and like you love the characters, you love the tempo and everything, but soon enough it's episode 10 and the season's over. So it was bittersweet making
mm,
it to the end. It was sweet because I got to come home to my family, I got to come home to my fiance, and it was bitter because I was so in love with this adventure of being immersed and dealing with simple things, like like I now I'm sitting at home in front of my laptop, and there's all the existential things about paying bills and you know fixing things, and it's when I was paddling, at least everything was so concrete. It was, waking
Simple.
up, making sure I ate. Was I warm enough? Paddle, like, just life was simple. And I guess I really felt comfortable there.
Yeah, makes life a bit more simple if you're focusing on those things. So, Casper, coming out of it, obviously you had a huge Viking style beard, which I was rather surprised you didn't keep for the Midsummer Vikings. Actually, all it needed was a horned helmet and really completed the picture. But in terms of your physical conditioning coming out of it, what were the physical changes? I mean, I guess if you were doing this as a training exercise, you certainly would have built your aerobic threshold through, constant days of grinding out those miles. But do you lose any weight and muscle, or do you notice anything?
Well, the takeaway physically was very kind of mixed, because I had a beard, that's right, and I think part of me was sad to let the beard go, but I was getting to a point where I don't know if I feel Viking enough to actually carry it, and it was scratching a lot.
Yeah.
I was having a hard time eating, but it'll come back. I'll let it grow again. But I think physically the biggest puzzle was because everyone kept pointing out that I was expecting to burn around 5,000-6,000 calories a day at least, and I was so focused on eating, and everyone kept pointing out, like, you look slim. How much weight have you lost? That was the most common question. And you know what the weird thing is? I actually did not lose any weight on the trip. I actually put on like 1.5 kilos, and anyway, 1.5 kilos could have just been fluid. Like, I could have been dehydrated when I weighed in, and properly hydrated when I came back. But I think I was so focused on eating. Plus, I had a very protein-rich diet, and given the fact that I had 30 kilos of weight on my board, I think I built on. And this is strange. Like, Magnus and I were still trying to make sense of it, because I put on a little bit of muscle mass. Like, I didn't come home super buff, but I didn't lose as much as expected. So it was strange. Like, I definitely think it showed me that I pushed some limits. Then I pushed it further than I've gone before. But I also learned that I did not hit my limit. Like, I could have probably kept going. And that was actually an interesting revelation, because everyone just assumed that when I came back, I was going to be smashed and, not functional of anything. So it was, I had a sore body. My shoulders were a little bit, how'd I say, they were pushed. And I had a little bit of issue with one of my knees. I think I needed, there was something with some ligament that was under pressure. But I was expecting it was going to be a whole lot worse. So I'm sorry, it's not the whole I hit my limit story, but
No, we're more than happy to hear that, Casper, and looking out for the next challenge. It's quite amazing. So just in terms of what's been going on for you recently, we've just had the Midsummer Vikings, and I was down at one of the GB SUP races on Saturday and spotted the logo on a couple of people there and spoke to them. And it sounds like this year it's been, as much of a success as has been in other years. I know that there was some proper Viking weather to contend with as part of that as well. Just talk us through the event, because like the 11 cities, it's a bit of a different format in terms of stand-up paddleboarding, but it sort of harnesses some of that sort of collegiate, collective team atmosphere, and it is a proper workout as well. I think I worked out that on the basis of the miles that the competitors had completed, that was enough to go at least 6 times around Denmark. So and that was obviously some of the time on the water lost. This is how much of a geek I am. So just talk us through the Midsummer Vikings and this last weekend, or a couple of weekends ago.
Well, the Midsummer Vikings, this is the 3rd edition of the event, as it happened this year. We had 400 participants from 21 different countries on 82 different teams. And if you rewind for a second, the Midsummer Vikings came about actually after my first attempt of crossing, after the second attempt of crossing Skagerrak and the Viking crossing. It was an idea I came up with together with a few other of my friends, paddlers at home in Denmark, and we felt that the world of stand-up paddling needed different styles of events, and especially at that point in 2019, there was stand-up paddling was already starting to boom, and we wanted to create a team event. Because there's plenty of events out there where it's the individual that fights. But if there's one thing I learned from my trip over to Norway on the Viking crossing, it was that I was only capable of doing that because I had a good team around me, and that was kind of what I wanted to try to bring with the event, was to help people help each other, support one another with pushing boundaries. And, that was the concept, and still is the same concept today. Teams of up to 5 people. One person is constantly paddling around the course, which is in Copenhagen. It's roughly 5.5 kilometers long. And it's, a location that's excellent because there's a little bit of calm, flat water. There's a little bit of exposed, slightly choppy waters. And this is the 3rd edition of the event, and we're still committed to it being I'm just happy to see it an event that brings out happy faces, and seeing people that otherwise wouldn't show up to a stand-up paddle race suddenly part of an event that is a festival essentially. And yeah, I'm still kind of on a, how do I say it? I'm feeling the blues right now, both after the Danish paddle, but also the Midsummer Vikings. And it's just, I had a dream of creating an event that was, provided something different and, could be a team thing. And I feel like we're on a good track.
Definitely. And what you've just mentioned is, the post-expedition blues, I guess people call it. You've got all of these mountains to climb and then you've achieved them and then you're over. I mean, you had the Midsummer Vikings, I guess, which potentially lessen the Great Danish Paddle blues. But you've got obviously a huge landmark event and obviously your culinary responsibilities for your wedding coming up. So you don't want to mess that one up. But what else have you got coming up over the next few months, and what can we look forward to seeing you doing?
Well, so I have my wedding coming up in the middle of August, which is the next, thing I'm really looking forward to. My fiance Stine and I, we're having a party, inviting friends from around the world, and that's kind of, it's just something I'm excited for because it's a celebration of life. And to be honest, what can we look forward to from here? I'm probably going to be racing again late in the year. We'll have to see what my body and mind is up for, because I'm pretty spent right now. But once I get some time here during the summer to get properly down to the earth again and recharge the batteries, I have a feeling that it's, how do I best describe it? I can feel tired and not motivated to do anything, but as soon as my batteries start recharging, it's like these small wheels start spinning and ideas start popping up. So we'll see. Probably not a big expedition the rest of the year, but I'll be planning something for next year, and I hope to do a lot of events in the later part of this year, where maybe it's not so much racing in focus, but focus on going to some fun events and, like you said, maybe paddle through some cool locations and actually enjoying the scenery and meeting people and talking stories. I guess on that note, we're finishing a documentary film about the Great Danish Paddle that I hope to release and tour around with, but that'll probably first be next year. So,
amazing. Yeah. And you shared as well, you recorded all of your experiences as you went round. Is that going to be a book, or are you just still processing that?
Yeah, I'm sitting with a book right in front of me here. It's just a simple notebook, but there's a lot of just my firsthand accounts when I wrote my diary during the Great Danish Paddle, and I don't know what it's going to turn into, but I have a feeling I want to try writing a book. I want to try sharing some of these, small and big events along the ride of my life, but especially during the Danish paddle. I got to meet a lot of people that had a very strong impact on me, and made me kind of start thinking about life, and how do I want to spend my life, but also like what values mean something to me. And I think I'm in a place right now where a lot of wheels are spinning in my head, but that's usually an interesting phase to be in.
And opportunities and so on come out of that. And there's been a huge amount of physical and mental outlay that you've put in both in your racing career and your exploration. So it's kind of just going with it. And as you said, that the path will open out in front of you. I've got no doubt whatsoever. Casper, thanks for being so generous with your time. It's been a really fun and a fascinating chat, and look forward to catching up with you in person if you are in London in August. I don't think anyone who can't Google something wouldn't be able to find out more about you, but if they happen to have lost that ability, how could they connect with you online?
Follow me on Instagram, Facebook. That's pretty much the two outlets I'm using. But hope to see a lot of people at events this year, and check out the Skagerrak documentary film if you haven't seen it yet. It's on Red Bull TV for free. So just stay tuned. Like I'm pretty sure something is going to happen, but first of all, let's enjoy summer.
Absolutely. Casper, thanks so much again. All of those links will be there in the show notes. Congratulations on such a stellar career so far. Go well this season, and I know I can comfortably speak for the entire SUP tribe internationally, and I wish you all the best for a fabulous wedding and a celebration this summer. Take care, and see you on the water, hopefully at some time.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, everyone.